You're standing on a frozen plain somewhere in Ice Age Europe. It's 40,000 years ago. The wind doesn't just blow, it cuts. Your breath freezes before it leaves your mouth. There's no fire yet tonight, no shelter in sight, and the temperature is dropping fast as the sun disappears behind a wall of gray cloud. This is the world most of our ancestors lived in for tens of thousands of years. And somehow, they didn't just survive it, they thrived in it. This is the story of how ancient humans survived hypothermia, one of the most relentless killers our species has ever faced. Not occasionally, not during freak storms, constantly for generation after generation, in places where the temperature could drop below freezing for months at a time. Here's the thing people don't appreciate. Hypothermia isn't some rare modern hiking accident. It's one of the oldest threats to human life on the planet. Before clothing, before fire, before shelter, the human body was essentially a tropical machine dropped into an environment it was never built for. We have almost no fur, our skin is thin, our babies are born helpless and need warmth for years. By any reasonable measure, humans should not have been able to live anywhere near the cold regions of the Earth. And yet, we did, repeatedly, successfully, for an almost unbelievable length of time. So how? Let's start with fire, because without it, none of this works. The earliest confirmed evidence of controlled fire goes back roughly 1,000,000 years, long before Homo sapiens existed. That fire wasn't just for cooking, it was thermal infrastructure. A fire burning through the night meant the difference between a group waking up in the morning and a group that simply didn't wake up at all. But fire alone doesn't explain how humans pushed into genuinely brutal environments, places like Siberia, the Arctic fringe, and Ice Age Europe during glacial maximums, where winter temperatures sat far below anything a naked human body could tolerate for more than a few minutes. For that, you need something else entirely. You need clothing. And this is where the story gets genuinely fascinating, because woven fabric doesn't appear in the archaeological record for most of human history. So what were people wearing before that? The answer is hides, animal skins, scraped, stretched, and somehow worked into something that could be wrapped around the body. Archaeologists have found bone needles dating back at least 40,000 years, some possibly older, with eye holes small enough that they could only have been used for fine, tight stitching. That's not someone draping a hide over their shoulders like a cape. That's someone constructing fitted, sewn garments, the kind that trap body heat instead of letting it escape through every gap. Think about what that implies. Somewhere, an ancient human looked at a pile of cold, stiff animal hide and figured out how to scrape it, soften it, cut it, and stitch it into something that could keep a body alive through a night that would otherwise kill it. And then they taught someone else. This wasn't a one-time invention. It was a technology, passed down, refined, and improved over tens of thousands of years. There's even genetic evidence for this. Studies on human body lice, the kind that live in clothing rather than hair, suggest that clothing-wearing behavior may date back over 100,000 years. Lice evolve at predictable rates, and the split between head lice and clothing lice gives researchers a rough biological clock for when humans started regularly wearing something that lice could colonize. 100,000 years of clothing. That's not a survival hack. That's a core part of what made the human expansion out of Africa even possible. Now here's where it gets interesting from a different angle. The human body itself isn't just a passive victim of cold. It actively fights back, and some populations evolve to fight back better than others. When your body gets cold, blood vessels near the skin constrict, pulling blood away from the extremities and toward the core, protecting vital organs at the expense of fingers and toes. This is why frostbite happens to fingers, toes, noses, and ears first. It's not random. It's your circulatory system making a brutal but logical decision. But some populations show something even more specific. The Inuit, for example, have been studied for a phenomenon sometimes called the hunting response, where blood flow to the hands cycles in waves, warming the fingers periodically even in extreme cold, allowing for continued dexterity, the kind needed to handle tools and weapons without losing the use of your hands entirely. This isn't something every population has to the same degree. It's a physiological adaptation shaped over thousands of years of living in environments that were actively trying to kill anyone who couldn't keep their core temperature stable. There's also brown fat to consider. Unlike the most people think of, which stores energy, brown fat burns energy to produce heat directly. Babies have a lot of it, which makes sense since infants are especially vulnerable to cold and can't generate heat through movement. Some populations that have lived in cold climates for many generations show differences in how much brown fat adults retain. This is evolution responding, slowly, generation by generation, to an environment that was actively trying to kill anyone who couldn't keep their core temperature stable. But adaptation only gets you so far. Biology can buy you margins. It can't make a human being immune to a Siberian winter. For that, you need behavior, and ancient humans had behavior down to a science. Shelter is the next piece of this puzzle, and it's more sophisticated than most people imagine. We're not just talking about caves, although caves mattered enormously, offering stable temperatures that didn't swing wildly the way the open air did. We're talking about constructed shelters. Archaeological sites in places like Ukraine and Russia have revealed the remains of structures built from mammoth bones, dating back over 15,000 years. Massive bones arranged deliberately, likely covered with hides, creating a windbreak and insulated dwelling in an environment with essentially no trees for building material. Think about the planning that requires. You need to source mammoth bones, transport heavy material, arrange it into a structure that can withstand wind, and cover it with hides that themselves needed to be prepared. This is a multi-step survival technology, and it had to work because the alternative was death by exposure within hours. And then there's the fire pit inside the shelter. Combining enclosed space with a heat source creates something close to a microclimate, a tiny pocket of survivable temperature inside an otherwise lethal landscape. Smoke ventilation had to be managed too, which means early humans were solving basic engineering problems, balancing warmth against suffocation every single winter for tens of thousands of years. There's also a piece of this story that's easy to overlook: groups. Hypothermia isn't just a problem for an individual body, it's a problem that group behavior can solve in ways an individual cannot. Sleeping in close physical contact, multiple bodies sharing warmth, creates a layered system of heat retention that no single person could replicate alone. This is part of why isolation in extreme cold is so dangerous, and why ancient social structures placed such enormous value on group cohesion during winter months. Surviving the cold wasn't just a technological problem, it was a social one. The people who stayed close to their group, who shared shelter, who cooperated on maintaining fires through the night, were the people who saw spring. So when we ask how ancient humans survived hypothermia, the honest answer is that they didn't survive it through any single trick. They survived it through a stack of overlapping solutions: fire, sewn clothing, constructed shelter, physiological adaptation, and tight social cooperation, all working together, refined over tens of thousands of years, passed down through countless winters where failure meant simply not waking up. And the truly remarkable thing is how recent our comfort against cold actually is. Central heating, synthetic insulation, weather forecasts that warn us days in advance, these are things that have existed for, at most, a couple of centuries. For the overwhelming majority of human history, surviving winter was an active, ongoing project every single year, requiring skill, planning, and cooperation that we now take entirely for granted. Next time you're cold for even a few minutes, waiting for a bus, walking to your car, remember that for most of human history, that same cold was a constant, serious threat that your ancestors solved night after night just so you could exist at all.